I never thought I'd find myself elbow deep in a box full of bees, let alone sharing a sticky moment with some guy whose hands smelled like a meadow in spring. But that's exactly how my Saturday at the city's annual eco fair started. Completely unexpected and, honestly, a little magical. So there I was, wandering through rows of tents pitched in the park, the sun warming my back and the smell of freshly cut grass mixing with everything from roasted corn to homemade soap. I wasn't really looking for anything in particular, just killing time before meeting some friends later. I'm more of a sit in a cafe and people watch kind of guy, but something about the fair's mix of green energy buzz and crafty stalls made me feel a little lighter, like the city wasn't just concrete and noise for a change. That's when I spotted the beekeeper's booth. Honestly, I almost walked past it. Beekeeping seemed niche, maybe a little weird, but the guy running the stall had this calm, quiet energy that pulled my attention. He was in this full-on beekeeper suit, the kind with the mesh face shield, but he had that easy grin you don't expect from someone dressed like they're about to enter a sci-fi battle. The sign said sustainable bees, sweet futures, and on the table were these jars of golden honey that practically glowed in the afternoon light. I stepped closer and he lifted the veil to flash a smile that was surprisingly warm. "Hey," he said, "want to see how honey really tastes? Not from a spoon, but straight from the hive?" I blinked, caught off guard. Sure," I said, figuring this might be one of those cheesy demos. But then he reached into one of the small hives he had set up on the table, carefully lifting out a comb dripping with honey. This guy's hands were gentle, steady, and yeah, covered in that sticky amber sweetness. He broke off a little chunk, his fingers glistening, and held it out like an invitation. I hesitated for just a second, then leaned in and tasted it. Honey straight from his fingers, floral with a touch of wild grass, nothing like the processed stuff you find in stores. It was like tasting the earth itself, the kind of sweetness that lingers and pulls you in. And I caught him watching me, his eyes a little brighter, like he was waiting to see what I'd think. That tiny, messy moment felt way bigger than a quick taste test. It was like the start of something I didn't know I was ready for. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how a simple jar of honey and a guy who keeps bees turned my whole day upside down. I wiped my fingers on my jeans, suddenly aware that my hands were sticky and probably looked like I'd just gotten into a candy stash. He chuckled softly, pulling off the gloves and jacket, revealing a simple green t-shirt underneath. The sunlight caught the faint golden hairs on his forearms. Something about him was just easy to look at. "I'm Max," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm but gentle, like he wasn't trying to show off strength, just connect. "Ethan," I replied, shaking his hand and still feeling the residue of honey clinging to my skin. "So what brings you here? Not the usual eco-warrior crowd?" Max asked, his eyes twinkling with humor. I laughed. "No, definitely not. I'm more into the whole support local coffee shops and pretend I'm productive scene, but my sister dragged me here. She's big on sustainability and all that jazz." He nodded knowingly. "Fair enough. It's a lot, all the green stuff. But bees, they're kind of the unsung heroes. Without them, we're in trouble. I always thought of bees as those annoying little things that ruin barbecues," I admitted. Max smiled, a bit rueful. "Yeah, they get a bad rap, but they're so fascinating. You know, their whole colony works as one organism. It's teamwork on a level we could learn from." I found myself leaning in, genuinely intrigued. "So how'd you get into beekeeping?" He shrugged, eyes tracing the patterns on the wooden hive boxes behind him. "I started in college. I was studying environmental science and needed a hobby that didn't involve staring at a screen all day. My roommate had bees, and one thing led to another. And now you're here, selling honey to city folks who mostly don't know what it's like to see a bee in the wild." "That about sums it up," he said with a grin. "Want to try something else? I've got this new batch with lavender and wildflower notes, straight from the hive this morning." I hesitated, but honestly, I was hooked. "Hit me." He scooped up a small wooden spoon, dipped it into a jar, and handed it over. The honey was smoother this time, floral and light, like sunshine condensed into sweetness. I savored it, surprised how something so simple could feel so alive. Not bad, right? Yeah, I said, smiling back. Really not bad. There was a pause, just the kind that feels comfortable instead of awkward. Then Max glanced at his watch. Hey, there's a talk about urban gardening starting soon. Want to come? It's just down the path. I was about to say no. I wasn't exactly the gardening type when something told me to say yes. So I nodded. Sure, why not? We packed up the honey jars and followed the crowd through the fairgrounds. The talk was in a shady grove, a little clearing surrounded by tall trees. Max pulled a fold-out chair for me while he stood near the front, looking like he belonged there, completely at ease. The speaker was this older guy with a beard and a weathered baseball cap, talking about how even small spaces could grow food and help pollinators survive. Max listened intently, nodding along, occasionally jotting down notes. I found myself watching him more than the speaker, noticing how passionate he got when talking about bees and green spaces. After the talk, Max leaned over. Want to see the rooftop garden where I keep some of my hives? It's not far. I blinked. Rooftop garden? In the middle of the city? That sounded wild. Yeah, sure. Lead the way. We walked through side streets and alleys. Max chatting about the eco-fair, the importance of preserving urban wildlife, and how bees adapted to city life. I told him a little about my job. Graphic design, mostly working from home, and how I didn't get out much beyond my usual coffee stops. When we reached the building, Max led me up the fire escape to a small rooftop that was like a secret garden. There were raised beds full of herbs, wildflowers, and, tucked in one corner, a couple of bee boxes humming softly. The city noise felt distant up here, replaced by the gentle buzz of bees and the scent of mint and thyme. Max opened one of the hives carefully, showing me the combs and the tiny workers swarming inside. I was surprised at how calm I felt, even with a few bees flying around. It was peaceful, almost like standing inside a living, breathing sculpture. I come up here when the world feels too loud, Max said, watching the bees. It reminds me that life's messy but still beautiful. I nodded, wanting to say something more but not sure what. Instead, I just stood there, the sun warm on my skin, sharing a quiet moment that felt way more significant than a rooftop garden. Then Max turned to me, brushing honey off his fingers with a grin. Want to try some more honey? This batch is from these very hives. I laughed. You're relentless. Only because you're an easy sell. He held out his fingers again, sticky and sweet. I hesitated for just a second before leaning in, tasting the honey, and somehow feeling like I was tasting a little bit of the world he cared about so much. And just like that, something clicked. Not just the honey on my tongue, but the way this guy made me feel. Like maybe, just maybe, there was a little sweetness waiting for me in the most unexpected places. After the honey melted on my tongue, I glanced up and caught Max's eyes. There was a softness there, like he was sharing a piece of something personal without even trying. I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I wanted to keep this moment going, like it was the start of a story I hadn't realized I wanted to be part of. The rooftop felt like its own little world, tucked away from everything below. The city's hum was faint, and the buzz of the bees was oddly calming. Max sat down on the edge of one of the garden beds, patting the spot beside him. I hesitated for a split second, then sat down too, the wooden boards creaking under my weight. So what's your story, Ethan? He asked, eyes curious but gentle. You don't strike me as the kind of guy who'd just wander into a beekeeping booth for fun. I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, fair. Honestly, I'm just terrible at saying no when my sister ropes me into these things. But now that I'm here, it's kind of nice. Makes me wonder if I should actually try something different. Like beekeeping? Max teased, raising his eyebrows. I shook my head, smiling. No, not that extreme. But maybe something that doesn't involve staring at a laptop all day. Something with a little more life. He nodded, like he got it. I always thought that too. When I was stuck in school, buried under assignments, the bees were this escape. They didn't care about deadlines or emails, They just did their thing, made something sweet out of pollen and hard work. We fell into an easy silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. I looked out over the city skyline, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows over the rooftops. The air smelled faintly of honey and earth, and I realized I hadn't felt this calm in a long time. "Want to see something cool?" Max said suddenly, standing up and holding out his hand. I took it without hesitation, surprised by how natural it felt. He led me across the roof to a small shed tucked behind the plants. Inside were stacks of wooden frames, jars of honey in various shades, and a collection of tools I didn't know the names of. "This is my little workshop," Max said with a proud smile. "I do all the honey extraction here." He reached for one of the jars, a deep amber color, almost glowing in the fading light, and handed it to me. "Want to try the newest batch?" "It's from wildflower nectar mostly." I dipped a finger in and tasted it. The flavor was richer this time, floral but with a hint of something smoky. It stuck to my tongue and made me want more. "Man, you really know your honey," I said, grinning. He smiled back, his eyes locking with mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "I grow to love it. There's something honest about it. No faking the taste, it's just what the bees give us." I found myself nodding, kind of mesmerized. It wasn't just the honey, it was him. The way he talked about something he cared about so much made me want to listen forever. Suddenly, the distant sound of laughter and music floated up from the park below. Max glanced toward the stairs, then back at me. "I'm supposed to meet a couple friends soon, but I'm not ready to go just yet." "Me neither," I said, surprised at how quickly I meant it. We stood there for a moment, the city skyline turning gold, the air cooling around us. Then Max surprised me by stepping closer, brushing a stray lock of hair off my forehead with those sticky fingers. "Ethan," he said softly, "I know this is random, but would you want to grab dinner sometime? Maybe somewhere with less bees and more food?" My heart did that weird jump you only notice when you're not expecting it. I smiled, feeling that same warmth spread under my skin. "I'd like that," I said. He grinned, the kind of genuine, easy grin that made me think this was the start of something real, not some fleeting fairy tale. "Cool. I'll text you?" "Definitely." We made our way down from the rooftop, stepping back into the buzz of the fair with its chatter and music and all the noise of city life. But somehow, the world didn't feel quite so loud anymore. Not with Max's hand in mine, sticky with honey, and that quiet promise hanging between USAs we parted ways by the gate. Max glanced back and waved. "See you, Ethan." "See you, Max," I called, already looking forward to the next time. I walked away from the fair feeling like I was still tasting that honey on my tongue. The whole day had turned out way better than I expected, and honestly, I kept replaying that moment on the rooftop, Max's fingers sticky with golden sweetness, the way he'd looked at me when I tasted the honey straight from his skin. It was one of those rare moments that doesn't just pass, it lingers. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Max, short and simple. "Dinner Friday? I know a place you'll like." I smiled so hard I probably looked ridiculous to my cat, who gave me a withering look like, "Okay, human, keep it together." Dinner came quickly enough, way faster than I'd anticipated. We met at this small, tucked-away place Max claimed was, quote, "good for bees and humans." It was a vegetarian spot with a rooftop patio, and he showed up looking casually put together, this time no beekeeper suit, just a worn denim jacket over a plain tee. The kind of look that said he was comfortable in his own skin, the kind I found myself admiring more and more. We ordered food and started with the easy stuff. Small talk about the week, his latest beekeeping projects, my endless stream of graphic design deadlines. But as the night slipped on, the conversation got quieter but deeper, like we were both wading into things we didn't usually say out loud. "I always figured I'd end up doing something else," Max said, stirring his tea slowly. "Beekeeping wasn't exactly the plan, but it kinda chose me." I nodded. "I get that. I thought I wanted a career in marketing, and now I'm just trying to figure out what fits." He looked at me, that soft smile creeping back. "Maybe it's not about choosing the perfect thing, but finding the right people, or moments, like this one." My chest tightened, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I reached over to touch his hand, the lightest of brushes that sent a jolt straight through me. The way his fingers intertwined with mine felt electric but calm at the same time, like a secret handshake between two people who had just realized they might be on the same page. We stayed there a while longer, talking about everything and nothing, until the city lights flickered on and the stars started peeking through the dark sky. Max leaned his head on my shoulder, and I didn't pull away. The next few weeks passed in a blur of texts, coffee dates, and quiet afternoons spent roaming parks or exploring new food trucks. Every time I was with Max, I felt like I was discovering a new side of myself, the side that loved simple things, like watching bees flutter over flowers, or sharing a jar of honey that tasted like a little slice of magic. One afternoon, he took me to one of his favorite spots, a small community garden hidden behind an old brick building. The place was alive with wildflowers and buzzing bees, and Max moved around with this easy confidence, checking on his hives and explaining what each flower meant to the bees. As he handed me a small jar of honey, his best batch yet, I realized how much I'd come to care about the world he loved so much, and maybe how much I cared about him. That day, standing there with the sun warming our faces, I thought about how strange and wonderful life is. How a chance encounter at an eco-fair, a sticky moment with honey on fingers, could lead to something that felt like home. Max smiled at me, eyes shining with that same quiet passion, and I knew I wasn't just tasting honey anymore. I was tasting possibility, and I was ready to see where it would take us. We sat side by side on a weathered bench in the community garden, the small jar of honey resting between us on the rough wooden slats. Max's fingers brushed mine as he handed it over, and that brief contact sent this warmth through me I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the honey anymore. It was everything that had been building between us, slow and steady, like the bees hard at work all around us. I was thinking, Max started, his voice low and a little hesitant. Maybe you could come with me next weekend. There's a local workshop on sustainable farming, and they're looking for volunteers to help with hive maintenance. I blinked, caught off guard. Me? Volunteer? I'm not exactly the nature warrior type. He laughed, the sound genuine and easy. You don't have to know everything. That's the point. You learn as you go. Plus, it's more fun with company. I chewed on the idea for a moment, feeling the pull of something unfamiliar but exciting. Okay, I'm in. But only if you promise not to laugh at me when I inevitably freak out about the bees. No laughing, Max promised with a grin. Deal. The next week, I found myself standing in a sun-dappled field outside the city, surrounded by a small group of people all buzzing with energy, pun intended, ready to dive into the world of bees and sustainable farming. Max was right there beside me, calm and confident, guiding me through the basics, showing me how to handle the hives without setting off any alarms. To my surprise, I didn't freak out. Not really. There was something meditative about the whole process. The slow movements, the hum of the bees, the way Max's voice was steady and reassuring. I even got to hold a frame filled with glistening honeycomb, the golden cells shining like tiny treasures. As we worked, Max glanced over at me, eyes shining with pride, and something deeper I wasn't quite ready to name yet. "You're a natural," he said quietly. I wanted to laugh at that, but instead, I just smiled and felt my chest tighten. It was the kind of moment that feels like the beginning of a story neither of us could have scripted. Later, as we packed up the equipment, Max pulled me aside. "Hey, there's a spot by the river I want to show you. It's where I go when I need to think. You in?" I nodded, curious. We walked in silence for a while, the path winding through tall grass and wildflowers, until we reached a quiet bend in the river where the water shimmered in the afternoon. Max sat down on a large flat rock, patting the space beside him. I joined him, the cool breeze carrying the scent of earth and flowers. For a while, we just watched the water flow, the world feeling so still and perfect. Then Max turned to me, his expression serious but soft. "Ethan, I know we haven't known each other that long, but I feel like I can be myself around you, like I don't have to hide the things that matter to me." I swallowed the lump in my throat, feeling the same truth echo inside me. I know exactly what you mean. I don't think I've ever felt that way before. Our hands found each other again, fingers lacing naturally like they belonged. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over everything. It was one of those rare moments where time slows down and the world narrows to just the two of us. Can I ask you something? Max said softly, anything. Would you want to come with me to the apiary tomorrow? It's a bit outside the city, and I think you'd really like it. I hesitated, then smiled. I'd like that. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized how much Max had changed things for me. Before him, my life felt like a series of repetitive days, safe but predictable. Now, it felt like I was on the edge of something new and exciting, something worth risking for. The next morning, we drove out of the city, the skyline shrinking behind us as we wound through quiet country roads. The apiary was this hidden gem, a sprawling garden filled with dozens of hives nestled among wildflowers and fruit trees. The air was alive with buzzing, and Max moved through the space like he belonged there. He showed me around, explaining the different types of bees, their roles in the colony, and the delicate balance that kept everything thriving. I listened, fascinated, but also feeling like I was learning more about him with every word. At one point, he caught me watching him and smiled. Glad you came. I met his gaze, feeling my heart race. Me too. As the day faded into evening, we sat on the porch of the apiary's small cabin, sharing a jar of honey and stories. The stars came out one by one, and I realized I hadn't felt this alive in years. Max reached over, brushing a stray leaf from my hair. Ethan, I don't know where this is going, but I want to find out. With you. I squeezed his hand, the warmth spreading through me like sunlight. Me too, Max. Me too. Those words hung between us like a promise, soft but weighty, under the blanket of stars in that quiet apiary. The night settled around us, the only sounds the distant hum of bees tucked in their hives and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. I looked over at Max, the way the moonlight played off his features, and felt something stir deep inside. A mix of excitement and the kind of calm that comes when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. We stayed there for a while longer, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. I told him about my childhood, how I'd always been a city kid, never really connected to nature the way he did. He shared stories about his first hive, the failures and small victories that had shaped him. There was this honesty between us that didn't feel forced or rehearsed. It felt real. Eventually, the chill in the air nudged us inside the cabin, and we settled on a worn couch surrounded by shelves stacked with jars of honey and books about bees. Max made tea, and I watched him move around the small kitchen with this effortless grace, the way he treated the space like it was an extension of himself. When he handed me the cup, our fingers brushed again, and I could hardly keep the smile off my face. So, I said, swirling the tea, what's the next adventure for the city's newest beekeeper apprentice? He laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. You're getting ahead of yourself. But honestly, I was thinking, maybe we could take a trip. There's this wildflower meadow a few hours north. It's supposed to be incredible during spring bloom. I've never been, and I think it could be amazing for the bees. And for us. My heart skipped. That sounds perfect. Max's eyes softened. I'm glad you think so. The next week flew by in a haze of anticipation. I found myself looking forward to every message, every call. There was something unexpectedly thrilling about the way our worlds were starting to blend. The buzz of the city and the quiet hum of bees and wildflowers. When the day came, we piled into Max's old hatchback, the car packed with backpacks, jars of honey, and a cooler full of snacks. The drive was filled with music, laughter, and long stretches of comfortable silence. The city slowly gave way to rolling fields and winding country roads, the sky stretching vast and open above us. When we arrived, the meadow took my breath away. Waves of wildflowers stretched as far as the eye could see. Lavender, daisies, clover, and countless others I couldn't name. Bees flitted busily from bloom to bloom, their tiny bodies dusted with pollen. Max pulled me close, his hand resting lightly on my back. Welcome to paradise, he said, his voice low. We wandered through the meadow, letting the sun wash over us as we talked about everything, the past, our hopes, the weird little moments that had brought us here. At one point, Max stopped and knelt beside a cluster of flowers, pointing out a rare native bee species. His passion was contagious, and I found myself absorbed in the world he loved so much. As the afternoon faded into evening, we spread out a blanket under a big oak tree and shared a simple picnic. The honey Max had brought was the star of the show, sweet, floral, and utterly alive on my tongue. When the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Max turned to me with that familiar soft smile. "You know," he said, "I never imagined that sharing my bees would lead me here, but I'm glad it did." I felt my heart swell. Me too. There was a pause, the kind filled with everything words can't capture. Then Max leaned in, and I met him halfway, our lips brushing softly before pressing together. A gentle, tentative kiss that felt like the start of everything. Afterward, we lay back on the blanket, his arm draped over me as the stars blinked awake overhead. The world felt wide and full, and I realized I was exactly where I wanted to be. That night, as we drove back to the city under a canopy of sparkling lights, I thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. A chance meeting at an eco-fair, a taste of honey from sticky fingers. That was all it took to open a door to something new, something sweet, something real, and I wasn't going to let it go. In the weeks that followed our meadow trip, things settled into a rhythm that felt good, like the gentle buzz of bees working together in a hive. Max and I spent more time exploring the quieter corners of the city and its outskirts, finding small moments that were ours alone. Sometimes it was as simple as sharing a pot of tea on his rooftop garden, other times wandering through farmers markets, picking out fresh flowers, and, of course, jars of honey. What surprised me most wasn't just how much I'd come to care for Max, but how much I'd come to care about the world he inhabited. The bees, the flowers, the delicate balance that felt so fragile yet so resilient. Being with him opened my eyes to things I'd overlooked, and in a way, I was learning to slow down, to be present, to appreciate the small, sticky moments that make life sweet. One afternoon, we were back at the community garden, Max showing me how to inspect a hive, when I caught him looking at me with that easy smile of his. There was something in his eyes, something steady and sure, that made my heart leap. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought I'd find someone who gets it." "Who gets me?" I swallowed, feeling that familiar rush of warmth. I didn't either, but here we are. He reached out, taking my hand in his, fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm glad you said yes to that first taste of honey." "Me too," I said, grinning. We stood there for a moment, the sun filtering through the leaves, the bees humming their quiet song. And in that simple, perfect pause, I realized this feeling, this connection, was something I wanted to hold on to. Not because it was flashy or dramatic, but because it was real. Because it was USA's, we packed up our gear and headed back toward the city. I felt a quiet kind of joy. Life wasn't about big, sweeping gestures or perfect moments. It was about finding someone who made the everyday feel a little sweeter. And with Max, I had found exactly that.